Julie, thanks for doing this with us and allowing our viewers to get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, it's a great opportunity.
We are at Point Defiance Park, right near the pagoda. It's beautiful here. Why'd you pick this location?
One, I don't have a campaign office. I am an income-constrained candidate. And two, this was where my campaign kickoff was whenever I first ran for Pierce County Auditor, my nonpartisan position.
Tell me what motivates you. Why are you running for Secretary of State?
Well, this is what I do. It's not something that I dabble in. For the last 13 years, I've conducted hundreds of elections, protected and preserved documents and made them accessible to the public, licensed businesses, etc., which may sound very dry to the viewers, but it's stuff that I love. I love making government work for people, and I love the detail, the accuracy, the precision, the technology, and taking that to scale and being responsible on a statewide level. Knowing how important the Secretary of State is to all the county offices is just something I'm called to do.
Let's talk about that because you touched on it. You were Pierce County Auditor for more than a decade.
Yes.
Do you think your resume will really resonate with voters?
I think voters want somebody that's a technical expert because they read in the news that election law is very technical, and they understand that elections can be decided by just a handful of votes. They also understand that technology is playing a larger and larger role in everything that we do in government. So I think they want somebody that has hands-on experience. I also think that they want somebody that is dedicated to service to the public. So I've been managing customer transactions for a long time, and that's what public service is. It isn't theoretical, it touches voters, and that's what I do. I like public service.
You are running as a nonpartisan candidate. Why?
Yes. I am running as a nonpartisan because I don't think that the person who is overseeing Washington state elections should be wearing a team jersey. I gave a speech to fifth graders the other day, and when I said that, you should have seen their precious little faces. They were like, yeah, duh, because they know all of that from the kickball field, right? I don't think that Americans appreciate having partisanship in this ever important job of election administration. I feel so strongly about this that I am not asking for or receiving any endorsements from any political party or receiving or accepting any money from political parties. 98% of my contributions are from individuals. This is also something that I've done all my life. I have never run in an office that's partisan. And in Pierce County, voters made the county auditor, the chief election administrator, nonpartisan by a vote of the people, because they understand that they don't want a partisan in charge of elections.
One of the main jobs as Secretary of State is administering elections. You mentioned you were talking to fifth graders. Part of the role is also to educate our residents in Washington and hopefully eventually touch those younger voters. Now, fifth graders are far away from being able to vote, but how do you plan, if you are elected, to reach younger voters?
Well, first of all, the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and an advisory council of social study teachers, U.S. government teachers, and the League of Women Voters are already doing a bang-up job of figuring out how to better educate and activate those young voters. And now we can pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds. So that is already a great way to reach into a younger population. So outside of high school, I'm really going to need community help. One thing that government is not good at, despite our best intentions, is reaching out to young people. We kind of have some old school communication methods and technology, and we need to use the platforms that young voters want to use. In Pierce County, I actually hired facilitators to have focus groups for teenagers, and we asked them what they knew, what they wanted to know, and what they needed. That's how I would design outreach for young voters. It needs to be youth-led. We've got so much leadership in young people. And we ignore it. Why would you ignore that kind of human capacity? So I'm going to harness those young leaders and ask them to lead the effort. And then we are going to put the resources, the energy, and the infrastructure behind it. But the idea really needs to be theirs.
You have said you want more transparency in the system. How do you plan to do that as Secretary of State?
Oh, I've got a few different ideas. First of all, transparency when it comes to election security. Making more things open to the public during our logic and accuracy testing, et cetera, and not just limiting it to political parties. In Pierce County, we do hash checks. Those are digital fingerprints of software before we start counting ballots and before we certify an election. I'd like to see all the counties doing that, but they do need a little bit of leadership and instruction and maybe some rulemaking to make that happen. I also want to have a risk limiting audit statewide. Right now, every county does a random ballot audit called by the political parties in every county. The political parties get to decide what race is being sampled. And in my county, they may be all hot and bothered about a school board race, but in Cowlitz County, it may be a Senate race. That means that the counties are all sampling different races. And they're not sampling them at a statistically valid manner. The p-value is all over the place. So let's augment the audits that we're doing that are great and do one statewide risk limiting audit where we're sampling one statewide race together at a statistically valuable level.
You said a lot of things that people may not quite understand because you have done this for quite some time. But in real simple terms, how do you think Washington's mail-in voting system is working and what can be done better?
I think that our mail-in voting system and the suite of election laws we have work really well. It's a perfect balance between security, auditability, and access. Very convenient but secure. So I like it an awful lot. There are ways that we could make it better. Even though vote by mail works for 95, 98% of the population, it doesn't work extremely well for voters who are living with disabilities. So that's one example. I have plans to expand vote by mail and provide digital options for voters living with disabilities and also our uniformed and overseas voters that are in combat zones overseas.
Given the fact that we have done this for a few years or quite some time in Washington state, do you think that other states should also adopt universal mail-in voting?
I like to export our evidence and our confidence to other states. Pierce County has hosted Hawaii, Indiana, and other states to come and visit, look at our technology and our procedures. So we act as a coach and a consultant to other states. I think that's the way it should be done. I think that every state needs to find their way into the most accessible voting system. So I don't want Congress to impose our beautiful set of laws on other states. I want them to get there on their own. Washington state took decades to get here. And in the end, voters are the ones that decided that they wanted to make vote by mail uniform. They voted with their feet. They opted into absentee voting. I'd like to see other states find their own journey, but I've got lots of evidence, technology, stories, and training that I can give them.
So you're saying lead by example?
Lead by example, absolutely.
Okay. You told the Seattle Times that you are the underdog. Going into November, do you still feel that way?
I have been, yes, I still think that it is going to be hard, but I have a lot of confidence based on polling data that's come out. I've read 2 polls so far that basically show that I'm neck and neck with my opponent, which tells me that voters and people responding to surveys, when they are presented with information about what the Secretary of State does, and that they have a choice of an experienced election administrator, I win.
Do you think that's what differentiates you?
Oh, I think 2 things. One, my resume and practical experience, and then 2, the fact that I'm not running with a political party. Those 5th graders have a lot in common with the people taking that survey.
If you're elected, what are you most excited for?
Oh, wow. I am excited about launching things like the Voice program, voter outreach and innovative civic engagement. I plan on combining philanthropic dollars with government dollars and putting granting opportunities out to local communities where they know their neighborhoods and their neighbors the best, and they can propose voter outreach methods. We're going to make sure it's best practices, but they can create get out the vote and voter registration forums that make sense in their community. It's going to be very different for teenagers at a Grange Hall in Asotin County versus a Somali community center in King County. And I can't wait to see what those proposals are like.
Is that something you did in Pierce County?
No, it's not something that I've done before, but it's something that's absent in Washington State. It is something I did in Pierce County for the 2020 census, though. We combined efforts with big state dollars and local community foundations and did that low barrier granting as a community. And I think it went very, very well. In fact, we broke records nationally for our self-response rate in that census. So it tells me that it's a promising approach. And reaching people to fill out a census application on their own is very similar to getting people to participate in elections.
What has surprised you most while you've been running for Secretary of State?
How universally popular it is to have somebody running that doesn't belong to a political party. I have got Republicans who are passionate Republicans. They're in the job of electing Republicans, and the same on the Democratic side, and they are willing to set aside their party interests because they know this office shouldn't be politicized.
What is something surprising about you that the voters might not know?
This is a little embarrassing. People might not, they're going to be surprised to know that I was actually a high school dropout.
Oh.
I've got a master's degree with a 4.0 GPA. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I've got a national and state certification in election administration. I love details, but I dropped out in high school. And everything turned out okay. And I'm definitely not encouraging people to drop out, but I think that always surprises people.
So it's surprising me. Tell me the journey there. What made you drop out, and then what made you come back and finish your education?
I loved classes and I loved learning, and I had some great teachers, but pep rallies, the classroom changes, it just didn't seem very serious to me. So I tried to enroll in Running Start, which back then in 1980 was kind of a brand new program, and at that time you had to have the permission of your guidance counselor to do that. My parents were all for it, but the guidance counselor said, I think that your emotional maturity and development is more important, so I'm not going to sign this. So I dropped out.
And then you went back to school?
And then I went back to college and loved learning at my own pace, loved the self-directed learning of a liberal arts degree. And then I loved the really rigorous science when I got my master's degree in criminal justice administration.
Do you think state governments should be involved in regulating how social media platforms moderate their content?
Here's what I really hope. I hope that the United States will adopt laws that bolster journalism and independent media. Social media platforms scrape and use media content, and they do it for free. And that is just cannibalizing serious media. So I want the United States to find a way of supporting journalism to help inform the public and give them alternatives to what they may be getting on social media, which isn't always the plain truth.
And what do you think the state of democracy in America is today?
Evolving, imperfect, always. It's messy out there right now. We're having some great debates, though, about the role of government. People are learning a lot really fast about the three branches of government and how important they are and what happens when they get chipped away. So it's messy, it's evolving, and I want to be part of the solution. One of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that people continue to have confidence in their elections. And if there's one place that there's not going to be drama, there's not going to be drama in my administration in the Secretary of State's office.
When we think of Secretary of State, we often think about running the elections here in Washington
Yes.
State, but there's much more to the job. What else are you excited to do in that office?
I'm excited to use a network of community organizations to educate people about address confidentiality program, which protects crime victims and survivors of domestic violence from revealing their residential locations as they participate in civic life. It protects them from revealing their address and voter registration, marriage applications, and coming soon from real property ownership. We're making the rules about that right now. We only have about 2,000 enrollees. I think that there are more people out there that could benefit from the confidentiality. I'm also interested in modernizing the way we intake, preserve, and make accessible public records. So many records that government generates right now are digitally native records. We need to be able to take them in all sorts of formats in a high volume, richly index them, and then turn them around and make them accessible to the public. And I think that's where my public records experience comes in.
You've mentioned a few times about modernizing the office and using technology as a bigger part of the Secretary of State's office. Can you explain that?
Well, for example, you may have heard that we have some problems with disparate impacts on populations who fail their signature verification in their ballot. You always have to sign your ballot. Well, very young people, people of color, people that don't speak English well, have a hard time passing that, and their ballots get rejected at a higher rate. I'm ready to look for alternatives to signatures as a method of verifying a voter identity. There is technology out there. We do it in banking all the time. So I want to gather technologists and stakeholders and find an alternative, not to replace signatures, but to give special populations an alternative.
And Julie, while we are here and we are chatting, I'm sure that not all of your time is occupied by just looking at Secretary of State stuff. So what are some of the things that you like to do on your off time?
Definitely community oriented. I belong to a lot of nonprofit organizations, so going to events in the community. Now my community is going to be much bigger, so I'm really looking forward to the community events, the fairs and festivals, and the convenings all across the state. So I love people. I love how invested they are in their communities and their passion for bringing unity to this country, and that's the way I like to spend my time.
Julie, I've had a great conversation with you. Thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for shining a light on this race.
For more local news coverage, live and on demand, watch King 5 Plus. Download free on Roku and Fire TV.